Thanksgiving used to smell like cinnamon and roasted turkey. It used to sound like my mother's laughter filling our small kitchen. I remember being 12, standing on a step stool helping her stir the gravy while she hummed old country songs. That was before everything changed, before she left us, before I became invisible to my own family. Last Thanksgiving, I stood on my father's porch holding a pumpkin pie I made using her recipe. I thought maybe this year would be different. 3 years without seeing them. 3 years of silence. But when that door opened, my father's face was cold as winter stone. Behind him, my brother Travis stood with his arms crossed and a smile that made my stomach turn. My father said 5 words that still echo in my mind. "We do not want to see your face." I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply placed the pie on the porch step, smiled, and walked away. That night, my phone would not stop ringing. Before I share what happened next, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If stories about family betrayal and finding your own strength speak to you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. You will not want to miss how this Thanksgiving turned into the most important night of my life. But to understand why they suddenly could not stop calling me, I need to take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business. Our house sat on 3 acres of land that my grandfather had given to my parents as a wedding gift. It was a white 2-story home with green shutters and a wraparound porch where my mother used to sit and read on summer evenings. My mother, Eleanor, was the most gentle person I have ever known. She had light brown hair that caught the sun like honey and green eyes that seemed to see right through to your soul. People always said I was her mirror image. Same hair, same eyes, same quiet way of observing the world before speaking. She taught me to appreciate small things. The way morning dew sits on grass, the sound of birds waking up at dawn, the feeling of flour between your fingers when you knead bread dough. My brother Travis was 4 years older than me and looked nothing like our mother. He took after our father Donald completely. Dark hair, brown eyes, broad shoulders, and a voice that commanded attention. Where I was thoughtful, Travis was impulsive. Where I found comfort in nature and solitude, Travis craved competition and admiration. Our father never tried to hide his preference. Travis was the son who played football, who talked about business, who walked with confidence that bordered on arrogance. I was the son who read books under trees, who helped mother in the kitchen, who cried when I found an injured bird in our backyard. Dad used to say that boys should be tough. That crying was weakness. That sensitivity was something to be trained out of a child like a bad habit. Mom would always intervene, pulling me aside and whispering that my heart was my greatest gift. She told me that feeling deeply was not a flaw, but a strength that most people never develop. Every Thanksgiving, Mom and I would wake up early while Dad and Travis slept. We would start the preparations together. She taught me her secret pumpkin pie recipe passed down from her grandmother. 3 teaspoons of cinnamon instead of 2, a splash of real maple syrup in the filling, a pinch of black pepper that no one could identify but everyone noticed. Those mornings in the kitchen with her were the happiest memories of my childhood. Then she got sick. The diagnosis came 2 weeks after my 12th birthday. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 4. I remember the hospital room, the beeping machines, the smell of antiseptic that could not cover the smell of death creeping closer. I held her hand in those final hours while Dad stood by the window staring at nothing. Travis had football practice. He did not make it in time to say goodbye. Her last words were for me. She squeezed my fingers with whatever strength she had left and said, "Promise me you will always be kind, Bart. The world needs more kindness." I promised. And I have tried every day since to keep that promise. After the funeral, everything changed. My father could not look at me without pain crossing his face. At first, I thought it was grief we shared. But slowly, I understood the truth. I reminded him of her. My face, my eyes, my quiet nature. Everything about me was a mirror reflecting the woman he had lost. One night, about a month after Mom passed, I was crying in my room. I could not sleep. The house felt too empty without her voice. Dad opened my door without knocking. I expected him to sit on my bed to hold me, to tell me things would eventually hurt less. Instead, he stood in the doorway and said, "Stop that crying. You remind me too much of her. It hurts to look at you." Then he closed the door and walked away. That was the moment I understood my place in this family had changed forever. I was no longer the younger son. I was a living reminder of everything my father wanted to forget. 2 years after Mom died, Dad started dating again. Linda was a real estate agent from Columbus. She was attractive in a polished way, with blonde hair always perfectly styled and nails always freshly manicured. She laughed at all of Dad's jokes and made him smile in ways I had not seen since before Mom's illness. I tried to be happy for him. I really did. At 14, I still desperately wanted my father's love. I thought maybe if he was happy again, he might have room in his heart to remember I existed. Linda moved in 6 months after they started dating. They got married on a Tuesday afternoon at the courthouse. I was not invited to witness the ceremony. Travis was. Linda was not cruel to me. That might have been easier to handle. Instead, she simply acted as if I were a piece of furniture, something that came with the house. She focused her attention on Travis, who knew exactly how to charm her. He complimented her cooking even when it was mediocre. He asked about her work. He made her feel welcomed and appreciated. I tried the same tactics, but my attempts were met with polite disinterest. After a while, I stopped trying. By the time I was 16, I had accepted that I was a ghost in my own home. Dad and I exchanged maybe 10 words a week, usually practical things about chores or schedules. Travis treated me with a mixture of condescension and annoyance, like I was a stray dog that kept hanging around despite not being wanted. The only light in those dark years was Grandpa William. Grandpa was my father's father, though you would never guess they were related based on how differently they treated me. He was a tall man with silver hair and hands calloused from decades of working his farm. His property sat about 30 miles outside of town, 120 acres of rolling hills, apple orchards, and a small pond stocked with bass. Every summer since Mom died, my family would ship me off to Grandpa's farm. They called it giving me fresh air and life experience. I knew the truth. They wanted me gone so they could pretend to be the perfect family of 3. But what they meant as exile became my salvation. Grandpa taught me everything: how to plant seeds and nurture them into crops, how to fix a tractor engine with nothing but basic tools and patience, how to cast a fishing line so it landed exactly where you wanted, how to sit in silence and find peace instead of loneliness. More than skills, he gave me something my father never did: unconditional love. I remember one evening when I was 15. We were sitting on his porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I had been quiet all day, still stinging from a phone call with Dad where he had forgotten my birthday again. Grandpa looked at me with those wise blue eyes and said, "You have your mother's heart. Bart, that is not weakness. That is your greatest strength. Do not ever let anyone make you ashamed of who you are." I asked him why Dad hated me so much. He sighed and looked out at his fields. "Your father is a broken man. He does not know how to handle pain except by pushing it away. You are not the problem, son. His inability to love you is his failure, not yours." Those words kept me alive through the hardest years. I graduated high school at 18 with honors. My father did not attend the ceremony. He said he had a work meeting he could not reschedule. Travis was there, but only because his girlfriend at the time wanted to see what a graduation looked like. He spent the entire ceremony on his phone. Grandpa drove 2 hours to be there. He sat in the front row with a camera he barely knew how to use, snapping blurry photos and cheering louder than anyone when my name was called. Afterward, he took me to dinner at a steakhouse. Over medium rare ribeyes and baked potatoes, he told me how proud he was. He told me that my mother would have been overjoyed to see the man I was becoming. He told me that the best revenge against people who underestimate you is living a life that proves them wrong. I got a partial scholarship to study agricultural science at Ohio State. It was not a full ride, so I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover the gap. I delivered pizzas 4 nights a week and worked weekends at a hardware store. I was exhausted constantly, but I refused to ask my father for money. Meanwhile, Travis got everything handed to him. Full tuition paid. A new car for his 21st birthday, an apartment in a trendy neighborhood of Columbus. He studied business and partied his way through 4 years while I scraped by on ramen noodles and determination. Despite everything, I kept trying to maintain some connection with my family. I called home every Sunday. Most of the time, no one answered. When they did, conversations lasted less than 5 minutes before someone had to go. I sent birthday cards to everyone, even Linda. I never received any in return. When I was 26, Travis got engaged to a woman named Heather. She came from money and had the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Their wedding was planned for the following spring at a country club that cost more per plate than I earned in a week. I received my invitation 3 weeks before the ceremony. It arrived in a plain envelope with no personal note, just the formal card with my name spelled wrong. They had written Bert instead of Bart. Still, I went. I saved for 3 months to buy them a nice gift. A crystal vase from a department store that I wrapped myself because I could not afford the gift wrapping service. The wedding was beautiful in an excessive way. Flowers everywhere, a 12-piece orchestra, champagne that cost more per bottle than my monthly grocery budget. I was seated at table 17, the last table, the one closest to the kitchen doors and farthest from the dance floor. My table mates were distant relatives of Heather who did not know anyone either. We made awkward small talk while the real guests laughed and celebrated near the front. When it came time for family photos, I waited near the photographer, assuming I would be called up. Instead, I watched as Dad, Linda, Travis, Heather, and her parents posed in various combinations. The photographer asked if there was anyone else, and my father said no. That is everyone. I stood there holding my champagne glass invisible while my family smiled for pictures I would never be in. Later, I slipped outside and sat in the parking lot on a concrete barrier. The night air was cool and smelled like the roses from the venue's garden. I stared at my shoes and wondered why I kept doing this to myself, why I kept showing up for people who did not want me there. Grandpa found me. He had been inside, but he noticed my empty seat and came looking. He sat beside me without saying anything for a long time. Then he put his hand on my shoulder. "I am sorry, son. I raised your father, but I do not understand how he became this way." I asked him if it would ever change, if Dad would ever see me as his son instead of his burden. Grandpa shook his head slowly. "Some people are too stubborn or too scared to change. But that does not mean you stop deserving love. It just means you have to find it elsewhere." We sat there together until the reception ended. Then he drove me home because I had taken a bus to save money on parking. The last 3 years with Grandpa were precious. I had finished my degree and gotten a job at an agricultural consulting firm about 45 minutes from his farm. I rented a small apartment nearby so I could visit him every weekend. His health was declining. At 82, his body was betraying him even as his mind stayed sharp. He moved slower, needed help with tasks that used to be effortless, but his spirit never dimmed. Dad and Travis visited him rarely, maybe 3 or 4 times a year usually when they needed something. A loan for Travis's latest business venture, help with legal paperwork, use of the farm's equipment. I watched them treat Grandpa the same way they treated me, as a resource rather than a person. It made my blood boil, but Grandpa would just shake his head and tell me not to waste energy on anger. During one of my visits about a year before he passed, Grandpa mentioned he had been meeting with his lawyer. He said he was getting his affairs in order, which was his way of acknowledging that the end was coming closer. I did not want to talk about it. The thought of losing him was too painful, but he insisted on having the conversation. "When I am gone," he said, "do not let them break you. You deserve to be loved, Bart. You always have. Promise me you will remember that." I promised him just like I had promised my mother all those years ago. I did not fully understand what he meant until later. Grandpa William passed 3 months before Thanksgiving. He died peacefully in his sleep, which was a small mercy. I was the one who found him that morning. I had come over to help him fix a fence section, and when he did not answer the door, I used my key. He looked peaceful, like he was just resting. But I knew immediately that he was gone. The funeral was held at the small church in town where he had been baptized 82 years earlier. The pews were filled with neighbors, old friends, people whose lives he had touched over the decades. He was loved by so many. Dad and Travis came dressed in expensive black suits that looked more appropriate for a business meeting than a farewell to family. During the service, I noticed them whispering to each other rather than listening to the eulogy. Afterward, at the reception, I overheard them talking in the corner of the community hall. The old man had at least $2 million, Travis was saying. The farm alone is worth $500,000, probably more with how land prices have gone up. Dad nodded. We need to talk to the lawyer Monday. Get this settled quickly. I felt sick. Their grandfather was barely cold, and all they could think about was money. The lawyer, a kind man named Richard who had known Grandpa for 30 years, approached me later that day. He pulled me aside and told me that the will would be read on Thanksgiving Day. That was Grandpa's specific request. He wanted the family gathered together for the reading. I did not understand why Thanksgiving. It seemed like an odd choice. But I agreed to be there. I had no idea what was coming. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke up early in my small apartment. Outside my window, the November sky was gray with the threat of snow. I made myself coffee and sat at my kitchen table thinking about the day ahead. But the lawyer had made it clear. All beneficiaries needed to be present for the reading of the will, and despite everything, Grandpa had wanted this. So I decided to try one more time. I spent the morning baking a pumpkin pie, my mother's recipe. I followed every step exactly as she had taught me. 3 teaspoons of cinnamon, a splash of real maple syrup, that pinch of black pepper. The smell filled my apartment and transported me back to those early morning kitchen sessions with her. For a moment, I almost felt her standing beside me. I put on my nicest clothes, a dark blue button-down shirt, clean khaki pants, my only pair of dress shoes polished the night before. I looked at myself in the mirror and tried to see what my father saw, a reminder of pain, a disappointment, a ghost. I shook off those thoughts. This was not about Dad. This was about honoring Grandpa's last wishes. The drive to my father's house took about an hour. The roads were quiet. Most people were already home with their families preparing for their own celebrations. I watched the bare trees pass by my window and practiced what I might say. Happy Thanksgiving. I made Mom's pie. I hope we can put the past behind us. When I pulled up to the house, I noticed the lawyer's black sedan already parked in the driveway. Good. That meant the reading would happen soon, and I could leave without staying for dinner if things went badly. I grabbed the pie and walked up the stone path to the front porch. The house looked the same as I remembered. White siding, green shutters, the same wraparound porch where Mom used to read. But it felt different now, colder, like the warmth had been drained out of it along with the memories. I took a deep breath and knocked. Footsteps approached. The door swung open. My father stood there in a burgundy sweater and pressed slacks. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth, but his eyes were the same, cold, distant, annoyed. Behind him I could see Travis leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He wore a smug expression, the kind that made me feel like I was walking into a trap. Linda appeared in the background, pausing near the dining room doorway. The table behind her was set beautifully, candles flickering, fine china. A gorgeous turkey centerpiece, but I could count the place settings from where I stood. 4. There was no seat for me. Dad. I started lifting the pie slightly. Happy Thanksgiving. I made Mom's He cut me off. We do not want to see your face here. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen, unable to process what I had just heard. Travis's grin widened behind my father. He said nothing, just watched with cruel amusement. I tried again. Dad, the lawyer said I need to be here for the will reading. Grandpa wanted... Dad laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The will. You think Dad left you anything? You are nothing, Bart. You were never part of this family. Travis is the real grandson. You are just the leftover your mother stuck us with. Travis pushed off the wall and walked closer. Just go, Bart. Do not embarrass yourself. Nobody wants you here. I looked past them at Linda. She met my eyes for a brief moment, then looked away. She was not going to help me. She never did. I stood there on that porch holding my mother's pie, staring at the family that had rejected me my entire life. I waited for the tears to come. They did not. I waited for the rage. It stayed quiet. Instead, I felt something I had never expected. Peace. This was not new. This was not a surprise. This was who they had always been. I had just finally stopped hoping they would be different. I bent down and placed the pie carefully on the porch step. "This was Mom's recipe," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She would have wanted you to have it." Then I straightened up, smiled at my father, and turned around. I walked back to my car without looking back. I did not run. I did not cry. I simply left. As I drove away, I watched the house shrink in my rearview mirror until it disappeared around a bend, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I was not sad about being rejected by them. I was relieved. I was finally free. I got back to my apartment around 5 in the evening. The sun was already setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that reminded me of those sunsets at Grandpa's farm. I did not have a Thanksgiving dinner prepared. I had expected to eat at my father's house, foolish as that assumption had been. So I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, comfort food that required no effort. I sat on my couch with my simple meal and looked at the framed photos on my bookshelf. My mother holding me as a baby. Grandpa and me standing by his tractor. The two people who had loved me most, both gone now. I wondered what Grandpa would think of what happened today. He would probably shake his head and tell me I deserved better. And he would be right. Around 8:30, I decided to go to bed early. There was nothing worth staying up for. I plugged in my phone to charge and turned off the ringer. I did not want to think about family anymore tonight. But when I woke up at 9:15 to use the bathroom, I noticed the screen of my phone glowing insistently on my nightstand. I picked it up. 23 missed calls from Dad, 15 missed calls from Travis, 8 missed calls from Linda. My stomach dropped. Something had happened. I scrolled through the text messages. They had started coming in around 7:30, about 2 hours after I left. From Dad: "Bart, call me back. Now. We need to talk." From Travis: "Pick up the phone. This is not funny." From Linda: "Bart, please answer. Your father is losing his mind." From Dad again: "This is urgent. Answer your phone." From Travis: "You need to come back here. Right now." I stared at the screen, completely confused. These were the same people who had told me they never wanted to see my face. Now they were blowing up my phone like I had something they desperately needed. Before I could decide what to do, the phone rang again. Dad's number. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to give them a taste of the silence they had given me for years. But curiosity won. I answered. "Bart." Dad's voice was strange, shaky in a way I had never heard before. "You need to come back. There has been a mistake." I kept my voice calm. "What mistake?" A long pause. I could hear Travis arguing with someone in the background. Linda was saying something about staying calm. Finally, Dad spoke. "Dad left everything to you." His voice cracked on the words. Everything. The farm, the savings, the stocks, $2.3 million. All of it. I nearly dropped the phone. "What the lawyer read the will after you left." Dad was practically panting now. "It says that William leaves all his assets to his grandson Bartholomew. It says you are the only one who loved him for who he was not, for what he had. And it says that you alone get to decide whether to share any of it with the rest of us." I sat down on the edge of my bed. My hands were trembling. "There is more," Dad continued. "He left you a letter. The lawyer has it. It is supposed to be for your eyes only." The room felt like it was spinning. $2.3 million. The farm I loved. The legacy of the man who had been more of a father to me than my actual father ever was. And they had kicked me out before finding out. "Bart, please." Dad's voice had shifted. It was soft now, almost gentle. "We are family. You cannot do this to us. Your brother needs money for his business. I am retiring soon. We were counting on this inheritance. There was a scuffle on the other end, and then Travis's voice came through. Bart, stop playing games. His tone was aggressive, demanding. Sign the papers to split it equally. It is the right thing to do. I let the silence stretch between us. Let them sit in their desperation for a moment. Then I spoke. The right thing to do, I repeated slowly. Where was the right thing when you left me standing on the porch tonight? Where was family when Dad told me I was nothing? When you told me nobody wanted me there? Travis started to respond, but I cut him off. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. He spent 82 years watching how this family treated me, and he made his choice. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the end call button. Then I turned off my phone completely and went back to bed. I did not sleep well that night. My mind kept racing through everything that had happened. But underneath the shock and confusion there was something else. Validation. Grandpa had seen me. He had known my worth even when no one else did. And he had made sure the whole family knew it too. The days after Thanksgiving were chaos. My phone rang constantly. Every time I turned it on, there were new voicemails, new texts, new attempts to reach me. Dad tried anger first, demanding that I reconsider. When that did not work, he switched to guilt, talking about how hard he had worked to raise me after Mom died. When guilt failed, he tried nostalgia, bringing up childhood memories that I knew were more fiction than fact. Travis approached it differently. He sent long texts explaining why an equal split was fair. He cited legal arguments about contesting wills. He threatened and then begged in alternating messages. His desperation would have been satisfying if it were not so pathetic. Linda sent a single message. Please think about what you are doing. This will tear the family apart. I wanted to respond that the family had been torn apart long before this, but I did not reply to any of them. Instead, I blocked all 3 numbers and let the silence do my talking. A week after Thanksgiving, I drove to the lawyer's office to formally accept the inheritance and retrieve Grandpa's letter. Richard, the lawyer, shook my hand warmly and told me that William had spoken of me often. He said my grandfather had planned this for years long before his health declined. The letter was in a simple white envelope with my name written in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. I did not open it in the office. That felt too public, too exposed. I thanked Richard and drove straight to the farm. I parked in front of the old farmhouse and sat in my car for a long time just looking at it. The white paint was peeling in places. The barn needed a new roof. The fields had gone fallow in the months since his death. But to me, it was the most beautiful place in the world. Inside the house, I sat at Grandpa's kitchen table, the same table where we had shared hundreds of meals together. I opened the letter. Dear Bart, if you are reading this, then I have moved on to whatever comes next. Do not be sad for me. I lived a long and full life, and the best parts of it were the summers I spent teaching you what it means to be a good man. I watched you grow up being ignored, pushed aside, and unloved by those who should have cherished you. I watched your father, my own son, fail you in ways that break my heart. I do not understand how I raised a man capable of such coldness. Perhaps I failed him somewhere along the way, but I refuse to let my failures continue through another generation. You are not the unwanted child they made you believe you are. You are kind, gentle, strong, and good. You have your mother's heart, and that heart is a gift, not a curse. This farm, this money, it is not just an inheritance. It is my apology for every moment you felt alone. It is my promise that you were always seen, always loved, always enough. Build a life here that makes you happy. Fill these rooms with laughter and warmth. Find people who recognize your worth and hold on to them. And Bart, you owe them nothing. Not forgiveness, not money, not your time or energy. If you choose to share this inheritance, do it only because it brings you peace, not because they pressure you. If you choose to keep every penny for yourself, know that you have my blessing and my pride. You were the best part of my final years. Thank you for loving me. All my love forever. Grandpa William, I sat at that table and cried, not from sadness, but from something deeper. Relief, gratitude, the overwhelming feeling of finally being seen after a lifetime of invisibility. In the weeks that followed, I made my decision. I would not share the inheritance. It was not about revenge. I did not hate my father or Travis, at least not anymore. Hating them would require me to still care what they thought, and I had finally let that go. No, my decision was about honoring Grandpa's wishes. He did not leave this to me so I could divide it among people who had treated him like an ATM in his final years. He left it to me because he wanted me to have a fresh start, a foundation to build a life on. I sent a single text to my father before changing my phone number. I am honoring Grandpa's wishes. He knew what he was doing. I hope one day you understand. There was no response. I did not expect one. I moved into the farmhouse in January. The first few months were hard. The place needed work, and so did I. Years of feeling unwanted had left scars that did not heal overnight. But slowly things got better. I repaired the farmhouse room by room, painted the walls, fixed the creaky stairs, replaced the kitchen cabinets. Each improvement felt like I was building something new, not just in the house, but in myself. I restarted the farm operations that Grandpa had let go as his health declined, planted new apple trees to replace the ones that had died, bought a small herd of goats that kept the fields trimmed and made me laugh with their ridiculous personalities. I got to know the neighbors. The Collins family down the road brought me casseroles when I first moved in. Old Pete Martinez, who had been Grandpa's fishing buddy for 40 years, stopped by every Sunday to share coffee and stories about the man we both missed. And then I met Grace. It happened at the farmer's market in town. I had started selling apples and honey from the farm, more as a way to connect with the community than to make money. Grace ran the booth next to mine, selling handmade pottery that she crafted in her small studio. She had red hair that she wore in a messy bun and freckles scattered across her nose. She laughed easily and often, and she had a way of making everyone around her feel comfortable. We started talking that first Saturday and did not stop. I learned that she had lost both her parents in a car accident when she was 19. She understood grief and loneliness in ways that most people could not. By summer, we were having dinner together every week. By fall, we were dating officially. By the following Thanksgiving, almost exactly 1 year after my father had slammed the door in my face, Grace was helping me host dinner at the farmhouse. The table was full. The Collins family came with their 3 kids. Pete Martinez brought his famous chili. 2 other couples from the farmers' market community joined us. Grace sat beside me, her hand occasionally finding mine under the table. And at the center of the table, a pumpkin pie. My mother's recipe. I looked around at these people who had become my family, not by blood, but by choice, by showing up, by caring. I thought about my father and Travis and Linda sitting in their perfect house with their resentment and their broken relationships. They were probably still angry at me, still convinced that I owed them something. But I had finally learned the truth that Grandpa had tried to teach me all along. Family is not about blood. It is about love. Real love, the kind that sees you for who you are and chooses you anyway. The kind that does not come with conditions or demands or rejection when you fail to meet expectations. I had spent 30 years trying to earn the love of people who were incapable of giving it. And in doing so, I had almost missed the love that was waiting for me all along. Grandpa's gift was not really the money or the farm. It was permission. Permission to stop chasing people who did not want me. Permission to build my own life. Permission to believe that I was enough. If you are watching this and you feel unseen by the people who are supposed to love you, I want you to know something. Their blindness is not your fault. You are worthy of love exactly as you are. And somewhere out there, there are people who will recognize that. Do not give up on finding them. Sometimes the family that raises you is not the family that loves you. And that is okay. The people who truly see you are still out there waiting for you to stop settling for less than you deserve. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from people who could not love you the way you needed? How did you find your true family? Share your story in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for spending this time with me. Wherever you are, I hope you are surrounded by people who choose you every single day. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, you are enough. You always were.